I'd be lying if I said I was looking forward to the dinner. Corporate events like that always left me feeling a little out of place, like a substitute teacher at a class reunion. But Allison? She'd been positively buzzing about it for days. Maybe weeks. It was her firm's annual investor gala hosted this time at one of those rooftop venues downtown with glass walls and a panoramic view of Seattle's skyline. I had never seen her more meticulous with preparations. Every detail mattered, her hair, her dress, the new clutch she bought just for the look. It was the way she moved through the apartment the day before, calculating, energized, that first made something in me feel off. I chalked it up to nerves. Big night, big crowd, important people. Maybe I was just being sensitive. But I noticed the difference. Allison didn't usually get this animated. She liked to keep things cool and composed, which, to be honest, was part of what first drew me to her all those years ago. She didn't need the spotlight to feel important. At least, that's what I thought. On the ride there, she was quieter than usual. Polished, but distracted. She kept checking her makeup in the mirror and reapplying lipstick. I tried to make conversation, small things, like if she'd seen the new employee benefits package that hit email that morning. She gave a few one-word replies, polite but absent. I figured her head was in game mode. Fair enough. Just stay close, yeah? She said as we pulled up to the valet. But not too close. I laughed, assuming it was a joke. Define not too close. She smiled thinly. Just don't hover. You know how these things are. I should have known right then. It wasn't nerves. It wasn't work. It was a warning I didn't fully hear until later. The elevator whooshed us up to the rooftop where the double doors opened into a room filled with soft jazz, expensive lighting, and the scent of catered ambition. The Seattle skyline spilled behind the windows like a high-definition backdrop, almost too perfect to be real. We stepped inside together. I reached for her hand without thinking, just instinct, steady her, steady me. But she slipped hers away just before we reached the first circle of colleagues. A smooth gesture, nothing dramatic. A glance at her dress strap, maybe a purse adjustment. Innocent if you didn't feel the space where her hand had just been. I didn't say anything. Not then. What would I even say? We approached a small group clustered near the bar, 2 men in well-tailored suits and a younger woman with a laugh too loud for the space. Allison slid right into the conversation like she was slipping into warm water. And then it happened. "This is Mario," she said, turning to me with that perfectly curated smile. "An old family friend." My first reaction wasn't anger. It wasn't even shock. It was confusion. My brain did a double take, replaying what she'd just said in slow motion, trying to match it against reality. Old family friend. Not husband. Not partner. Not even friend. Old family friend. I managed a polite nod, my jaw relaxing into a practiced, passive smile. No one flinched. Not one person blinked. The conversation rolled on like it was the most natural thing in the world. And why wouldn't it be? Allison made it easy to believe. Her laugh was effortless. Her posture was sharp, confident, magnetic. And I stood just behind her, clutching a drink I didn't want and didn't sip, fading into the periphery like I was her plus one, tagging along for an evening I barely understood. I couldn't stop wondering, had she said that before? Had she introduced me like that to people I'd never meet again, using some soft version of the truth that made her look more independent, more desirable? Had I been standing in rooms like this, invisible, for longer than I realized? We moved through the crowd in small doses, Allison flitting from group to group, her voice shifting subtly for each audience. I followed, smiling where appropriate, offering handshakes and nods, dropping a comment here and there when space allowed. I was a prop, a part of the set design. At one point, I ended up talking to a man named Doug, an older partner who asked if I was in the field, too. I told him I worked in logistics and supply chain. He smiled politely and promptly excused himself. By the time we made it to the buffet line, I was starving, but I couldn't stomach much. My appetite had gone the way of my identity, quietly misplaced somewhere between the valet stand and the open bar. Later, when we finally found a quiet moment near the edge of the balcony, I leaned in and asked, low enough that no one else would hear, "Why did you say I was a family friend?" She didn't even hesitate. Didn't stammer or blink. "Oh, come on," she said, brushing hair from her shoulder like she was swatting away a leaf. "You know how conservative this firm is. Husband might have made things awkward. It's no big deal." Her voice was light, joking, but there was an edge under it. An unspoken dare, don't make a thing out of this. I let it go. At least outwardly. But the truth was, something inside me had already split. Maybe it sounds dramatic. Maybe it was. But in a marriage, you learn to spot the tiny shifts, the moment when warm becomes lukewarm. When familiar becomes distant. That was mine. From then on, I couldn't stop seeing it. The way she leaned in closer to the man with the narrow tie. The way her smile widened just a little more for her boss. The casual, almost dismissive glance she gave me when I said I was heading to the restroom like I was some distant obligation. Like she was hoping I'd stay gone long enough for her to keep being whoever she was tonight. When the dinner finally ended and we were back in the car, I watched her through the reflection in the passenger window. Her makeup was still perfect. Her smile was gone. She turned to me once as we waited at a red light. "You were quiet tonight." I wanted to ask her again. I wanted to say, "You didn't introduce me as your husband." Why? But I already knew the answer. I just didn't want to believe it. Instead, I said, "Just tired." She nodded, stared back out the window. "Well, you looked good in that jacket." I'm sure the wives were jealous. It sounded like a compliment, but it landed like an apology wrapped in deflection. Back home, we got ready for bed in silence. She scrolled her phone. I stared at the ceiling. When the lights went out, she rolled away from me, pulling the comforter just slightly tighter on her side. I didn't sleep. I stared at the dim outline of the ceiling fan and listened to her breathing, wondering how something as simple as a 2-second introduction could echo so loudly in the dark. It wasn't the words themselves. It was what they revealed. And somewhere, under the layers of etiquette and image and quiet sacrifice, I started to feel it, the beginning of something ending. A week passed. Maybe 2. But that night on the rooftop kept replaying in my head, unshakable like a melody I couldn't stop humming. I told myself I was overreacting. That Allison didn't mean anything by it. That maybe, just maybe, she was right. Maybe her firm really was too uptight, too old money for married introductions and emotional attachments. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about the firm. It was about distance. And the truth that had begged *N to settle between us like cold fog, she was pulling away. The next event came quicker than expected, another company affair, this time more casual. A Friday night cocktail mixer at some hotel rooftop bar downtown. Client-facing but relaxed, Allison had said. No need to wear a tie. I hadn't been invited directly, she just mentioned it the day before like it was an afterthought. A footnote in the middle of dinner. "You're welcome to come," she said without looking up from her laptop. "But it's mostly just my team and some new leads. Probably boring." I nodded. "I'll come. Haven't seen your team in a while." That earned a pause. A 2-second delay where she almost said something but didn't. Then she smiled faintly and went back to typing. "Cool. I'll let them know." She didn't. When we arrived, the setting was already in full swing, warm ambient lighting, a saxophonist playing over soft house beats, waitstaff gliding between clusters of people with trays of rose and cucumber gin cocktails. The crowd was younger this time. Louder. Less polished. I spotted maybe 2 faces I recognized from before, and even they gave me the sort of tight, polite smiles that said, "Oh, you again." Allison, on the other hand, was glowing. I watched her float through the room like she belonged to it. Perfect posture, effortless charm. She made people laugh, not in the way coworkers do out of obligation, but with the kind of ease that draws people in. I stayed at her side at first, trying to keep up, chiming in with the occasional joke. But it wasn't long before she was several steps ahead of me, literally and figuratively pulled into a new group with outstretched hands and overlapping greetings. And that's when I first noticed him. Chris. Tall. Confident. Wearing a dark navy jacket with just the right amount of rumple. He looked like the kind of guy who ordered rare whiskey and never checked his watch. At first, I thought he was just another coworker. But then I caught the way his hand lingered on Allison's arm when he laughed. The way she leaned in when she responded. It wasn't overt. It wasn't scandalous. It was familiar. Too familiar. They moved around the room together like planets in a shared orbit. He touched the small of her back as they reached the bar. She laughed at something he whispered, brushing his shoulder with the edge of her hand. I knew that laugh. That light, slightly breathy laugh she used to give me back when things were still new. When she wanted to flirt without trying too hard. It felt like watching my wife play a version of herself I hadn't seen in years. I tried to shake it off, sipping my drink too fast and nodding along to some guy talking about cryptocurrency until my head buzzed with both boredom and suspicion. But my eyes kept drifting back to Allison and Chris. I couldn't stop watching them. Couldn't stop replaying moments from our own past that looked eerily similar. First dates, late-night walks, her fingers on my wrist when she laughed. Eventually, I caught her alone near the hallway to the restrooms. She was scrolling through her phone, her drink nearly empty. I walked up slowly, careful not to sound accusatory. "Having fun?" I asked. She looked up, surprised. "Yeah, I guess." "Why?" You and Chris seem pretty close. Her expression shifted, not guilt, not panic. Something cooler, controlled. He's on my team, she said with a half shrug. We work together. I figured, I replied. He seems comfortable. That made her laugh, but not the way she laughed with Chris. This one was dry, defensive. You always get weird at these things. I'm not weird, I said. I just noticed. She glanced at her phone. I need to take this. It's work. And just like that, she stepped away, disappearing down the hallway. I stood there alone, holding an empty glass, the music pulsing around me like a heartbeat I couldn't sync to. I waited by the bar. 5 minutes. 10. The phone call, if it ever existed, was long. Or maybe it turned into another kind of meeting, a different kind of conversation. 30 minutes passed. When she came back, something was different. Her hair had been tucked behind her ears earlier. Now it was down again. Her lipstick had changed, a deeper red than before. She smelled like something floral and heavier than the perfume she wore when we left the house. And in her clutch, slightly visible as she adjusted it beneath her arm, was a cocktail napkin. Folded, scribbled on. I caught just enough of the writing to notice a 3-digit number. Something like 614, and a set of initials. Not hers, not mine. She acted like nothing had happened. Glided back into the party with a fresh drink and a breezy smile. I followed her movements from a distance, feeling like a ghost in my own life. When the night finally wound down, I drove us home in silence. She leaned back in her seat, scrolling through her phone, occasionally replying to a text with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. I wanted to ask about the napkin, about the change in lipstick, about the phantom call, but I didn't. I didn't know how to ask without sounding jealous, insecure, crazy. So I said nothing. Back at the apartment, she kicked off her heels and disappeared into the bathroom. I heard the lock click, then music start to play loud, bass-heavy, some synth-pop playlist she used when she wanted to disconnect. The kind that made the walls pulse if you leaned close. An hour passed. I sat on the bed, staring at the muted glow under the bathroom door. I could see her shadow moving around. Occasionally, I heard her hum along to the song. At one point, there was the unmistakable sound of her phone ringing. She answered it. Her voice was soft, too soft to catch clearly. But the tone was int asterisk mate. Warmer than anything she'd said to me that night. I didn't knock. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, numb, and waited for the music to stop. When it finally did, sometime after midnight, she emerged without a word. Her makeup had been wiped off, her hair tied in a loose knot. She looked at me like she forgot I was there, like I was a piece of furniture she'd outgrown. Long night, she muttered, climbing into bed on her side. Yeah, I said. She turned away, her breathing steady within minutes. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling again, wondering if I was imagining everything, or if I was finally seeing things clearly for the first time. Because the perfume, the napkin, the lipstick, they weren't accidents. They were signals, and I was no longer sure if I was supposed to notice, or if she just didn't care anymore if I did. If silence was an answer, I was starting to hear it loud and clear. Allison and I didn't fight. We didn't scream or slam doors. That would have at least meant something real was being wrestled with. Instead, there was a strange calm in the days that followed the cocktail party. Like we were two coworkers who happened to share a kitchen and a bed. Polite, measured, and increasingly distant. I'd wake up and she'd already be dressed. Come home and she'd be just heading out. Our conversations were transactional. Schedules, groceries, a text reminder to pay the electric bill. She didn't lie outright. Not with words. She just stopped telling me anything at all. The more I tried to ignore it, the worse it got. Her phone habits changed. Always tilted just out of my line of sight. Held closer to her body. Never left on the kitchen counter like before. Notifications dimmed. Her laughter, when it came, was never shared with me. Just quick, quiet chuckles into a screen, then a lock click and silence. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. That's what emotional erosion does. It makes you second-guess your own instincts. I told myself I had no proof, no confrontation-worthy evidence. Just a trail of feelings and a growing list of things that didn't add up. But the truth was gnawing at me. Subtle, persistent. Then one Saturday morning when she left for a strategy offsite that was supposedly happening an hour outside the city on a weekend, no less, I felt something shift inside me. I stood in the middle of our apartment holding my coffee and stared at the door long after she'd gone. I waited 5 minutes, then 10, and then I walked into the study. There, beneath a stack of old tax folders and power cords, was her previous work laptop, the one she used before upgrading a few months back. She never officially decommissioned it, just set it aside like an old coat. I plugged it in, heart pounding, hands cold. It worked to life slowly, like it had been asleep too long. Her old password still worked. The desktop was a mess of folders and screech *TS. I clicked through with no particular strategy, just following instinct, digging, hoping I wouldn't find what I suspected. But I did. She'd synced her cloud accounts automatically. Photos, voice memos, saved PDFs. All of it still quietly updating, still tied to her email. The first photo I opened was of her standing in a hotel mirror. Different outfit than I'd ever seen, angled just enough to show the bed in the background. Crisp, untouched sheets and a man's coat laid over the chair. His face wasn't visible, but the presence was unmistakable. The next photo? Same room. Allison on the bed this time, her hair tousled. The man was beside her, shirtless, turned away. I didn't feel rage. Not right away. What I felt was a vacuum. The air seemed to thin. Time slowed. Everything in the room, books, furniture, the humming of the fan, felt distant. There were more photos. Some recent. Some dating back months. I couldn't stop clicking. I couldn't stop looking for something that would prove I was wrong. Instead, I found a folder titled Recordings. Inside, voice memos. Roughly a dozen. Short entries labeled only with timestamps. I clicked one. Allison's voice came through, casual, chatty, recorded like she was documenting her day, talking to someone or no one. I don't know. And Mario made that face again. God, he's so predictable. It's like he tries to read me and just comes up blank. I don't know how to explain it. He's kind, he's steady, but sometimes I feel like I'm married to a filing cabinet. No spark. No fire. My stomach clenched. I clicked another. If I ever do leave him, it won't be dramatic. He wouldn't fight. That's the worst part. He'd probably just nod, say, okay, and help me pack. He's too quiet. Too easy. There was a laugh. Not cruel, but amused. Comfortable. Like she was saying something obvious. I shut the laptop. For a few minutes, I just sat there in the dim study, the light from the screen still glowing behind my eyelids even after I closed them. I wanted to feel anger. I wanted to throw something, break something, but I couldn't. All I felt was the weight of knowing. And the knowing didn't stop. I reopened the laptop and found one final file, a Word document titled Life Audit. It was a list. Why stay with Mario? Financial stability. No drama. Doesn't ask questions. Good reputation optics. Minimal emotional upkeep. Easier taxes. Predictable. Each line landed like a punch. There was no mention of love. No memory of vacations, of the night we got engaged, of our slow dancing barefoot in the kitchen one rainy Tuesday. Just convenience. Calculations. I closed the laptop again, slower this time. That's when the shift happened, not in her, but in me. I no longer needed to ask questions. No longer needed to guess. The truth wasn't just out in the open, it was organized, labeled, stored in folders. This wasn't an affair. This was a second life. And I was the cover story. I walked into the living room and sat in silence for over an hour. No TV. No music. Just the sound of my own breathing and the faint buzz of her electric toothbrush she forgot to unplug in the bathroom. When she came home that evening, hours later than she said she would, I didn't confront her. I didn't throw the laptop on the table or demand she explain the list. I greeted her with a quiet hey and asked how the offsite went. She blinked, clearly surprised. Exhausting, she said. I'm gonna take a shower. I nodded. Okay. She disappeared down the hallway, her heels clicking on the wood floor like nothing had changed. But something had. That night, as she slept soundly beside me, mouth slightly open, breathing slow, I stared at the ceiling again. But this time, I wasn't lost. I wasn't spiraling. I was planning. Not revenge. Something cleaner. Something permanent. A way out. Some betrayals come with fireworks. Mine came with silence. After I found the photos, the recordings, the list, after I stared at the words minimal emotional upkeep typed in a font she probably used for meeting notes, I didn't confront Allison. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the laptop across the room or scroll through the rest of her digital archives looking for some dramatic final straw. I had seen enough. And once you know you're just a box checked on someone's spreadsheet, there's really only one thing left to do: close the file. I got up the next morning at 6 a.m. before she was awake. I made coffee. Black, no sugar. I sat at the kitchen island, staring into the dark liquid like it might offer a manual for what comes next. It didn't. So I made one myself. Step 1. Call in sick. Something I hadn't done in 2 years. I told my manager I was dealing with a family issue, and to his credit, he didn't pry. He just told me to take whatever time I needed. Step 2. Find a lawyer. Not a flashy billboard one. I wanted someone discreet, efficient, and brutal in the right ways. I spent the next 3 hours reading reviews, cross-referencing forums, and making quiet phone calls from the car so Allison wouldn't overhear if she came home early. I ended up with a woman named Denise Katz, a former corporate litigator who left big law to get results without breaking lives. We had a phone consult by 1 o'clock. By 1:30, she had a copy of the laptop's contents. I didn't embellish. I didn't editorialize. I just forwarded what I had: photos, voice memos, the life audit document, and told her I wanted a clean break. No drama. No alimony. No second chances. Denise said something I didn't expect. She said, "You're handling this well." But I wasn't handling anything. I was just done pretending I didn't see what was in front of me. Step 3. Secure the assets. We never had a shared checking account. Allison preferred financial independence, which, in hindsight, was probably less about empowerment and more about insulation. But our savings were joined. So was the deed to the condo. And the emergency fund. I spent the next 2 days quietly shifting things, not hiding, not stealing. Just drawing the lines that should have existed all along. I transferred my portion of savings into a new solo account, leaving hers untouched. I rerouted my direct deposit, froze the shared credit card, paid off the balance first, then closed it. I called the mortgage company and filed to have the deed amended under review, something I could do based on how much of the down payment came from my premarital inheritance. Denise helped with the paperwork. The less you explain to her, the stronger your position, she said. And I realized then that this wasn't just about detachment. It was about protection. Quiet, deliberate boundaries. Step 4. The house. It was a 2-bedroom condo in Belltown. Not flashy, but clean. Modern. The kind of place you could tell your parents about without them raising their eyebrows. We'd picked it out together, or so I thought. Now every room looked different. The couch where she used to curl up with her laptop at night? That was where she recorded those voice memos. The hallway mirror? That was where she probably checked her makeup before sneaking out to meet someone else. I didn't want to burn it all down. I just wanted to make it mine again. So I changed the codes. Every one of them. The smart lock, the garage, the alarm system. I replaced the Wi-Fi router and reset every password. Bank accounts. Streaming services. Even the shared grocery delivery login. Then I packed. Not my things. Hers. I didn't dump them into garbage bags or stack them in angry, chaotic piles. I folded her sweaters. I wrapped her framed photos in bubble wrap. I dusted off the box of childhood keepsakes she never opened but insisted on keeping in the hall closet. I put everything in labeled containers, 5 in total, and rented a storage unit 1 block from her office. Somewhere public. Neutral. The email I sent her was short. "Hey, your things are in storage, unit number 204, 9th and Lenora. I've removed your access to the condo. Please use the keycard inside box 1 to enter the unit. Mario." I didn't say why. I didn't tell her what I'd found or how long I'd known. I just acted. And that strangely gave me peace. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't reacting to her anymore. I wasn't orbiting her moods, her choices, her omissions. I was living in my own gravity. She didn't respond right away. In fact, I didn't hear from her at all for nearly a full day. I went for a walk that evening, out along the waterfront, past the ferry terminals and the rusted sculptures near the Olympic Sculpture Park. The water was still. I watched the reflection of the city ripple and fade like a memory trying to vanish. When I came back, there were 5 missed calls from her. Then a text. "What's going on?" Then another. "Are you serious right now? You can't just lock me out." And then silence. No apology. No denial. Just entitlement, stunned and impatient. I didn't reply. I had nothing to say. At 2:13 a.m. I heard footsteps outside the door, fast, frustrated ones. I got up, peered through the peephole. It was her. Standing in a hoodie, still dressed from wherever she'd been. She tried the keypad. Entered the old code twice. The screen blinked red. Then she rang the bell. Then she knocked. Then she just stood there, texting. I watched the message come in as she stood feet away. Mario, open the door. We can talk about this. I turned my phone face down. Allison had grown used to my silence. She had learned to *p***nize it against me. Every time I didn't confront her, she took it as a license to continue. To spin. To curate a version of the truth that kept her unchallenged. But this silence was different. It wasn't passive. It was final. Eventually, she gave up. I watched her walk back toward the elevator, her head down, phone in hand. And as the door slid shut behind her, I felt it. A closing. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just a quiet end to the life she thought she could compartmentalize forever. She wasn't just locked out of the condo. She was locked out of me. You'd think someone like Allison, someone so poised, so calculated, would have been ready for fallout. That she would have had a contingency plan, a script, a graceful pivot to land on. But when the world she curated started to unravel, it wasn't with fire or scandal. It was with silence. It started with the friends. I had sent out one email, one single message to a short list of mutuals, people who had been at our wedding, who'd shared holiday dinners with us, who probably thought they knew us. I didn't write anything vindictive. No dramatic subject line. No all caps rage. I just attached a zip folder. Inside were *TS. Photos. The life audit document. Voice memos neatly trimmed to a few seconds each. No interpretations, no commentary. I let Allison speak for herself. A few responded. Short replies. Things like, I'm so sorry. Didn't know. Jesus. Let me know if you want to talk. Others didn't respond at all, but I noticed the digital shift. Allison's Instagram, once a carousel of curated career photos and brunches with the caption #WomenInBusiness, went quiet. Comments dried up. Her LinkedIn activity stopped cold. Her usual monthly post, grateful for my team. Another great quarter. Never came. I watched not out of spite, but out of curiosity. How fast does a reputation fall when it's built on illusion? Faster than you'd think. I learned later, through a mutual friend, that Allison tried to do her own damage control. She told some people we were going through a rough patch, that I was struggling emotionally, that I had misunderstood a situation that was, in her words, complicated and nuanced. But lies don't hold up well when everyone's already seen the receipts. The real tipping point came at work. Someone, I don't know who, and I didn't ask, sent a copy of the files to her firm's HR department. Maybe it was a colleague. Maybe it was a friend who decided they couldn't stay quiet. Doesn't matter. What matters is that someone pulled the thread. Suddenly, Allison was called into a meeting. Then another. Her calendar, which used to be filled with pitch decks and client dinners, turned into internal alignment sessions and special project discussions. She was pulled off accounts. She was reassigned. Technically, she wasn't fired. But in a place like that, they don't need to fire you. They just make you invisible. She stopped getting invites. The junior associates stopped responding to her Slack messages. The partners stopped making eye contact in the elevator. Her keycard still worked, but the doors behind it didn't open the same way anymore. At home, wherever that was for her now, things didn't look much better. Her sister stopped liking her posts. Her cousin canceled plans. Her father, who used to comment under every photo with "proud of you, kiddo," went noticeably silent. You could say it wasn't fair. That personal mistakes shouldn't bleed into your career. But Allison didn't live in a world where those things were separate. She'd spent years branding herself as a high-functioning, emotionally intelligent powerhouse, someone who had her life, her relationship, her career all perfectly tuned. So when people saw the truth, when they read in her own words that her marriage was strategic, that she saw me as low maintenance, that she mocked me for being stable, it shattered the image. An image was everything to her. One day, Denise, my lawyer, forwarded an email from Allison's counsel. A polite inquiry, would I be open to mediation? I replied with one word, prepared. That word seemed to carry more weight than expected because the next email came with a surprising offer. She wouldn't seek alimony. She wouldn't contest the division of property. She just wanted to close things out respectfully. Translation, she knew she couldn't win. The settlement, when it came, was shockingly clean. She kept her car. A few items from the storage unit. One piece of jewelry. I hadn't expected her to mention a silver bracelet from our honeymoon in Barcelona, something she'd once said she wore only for sentimental balance. I let her have it. Not because I was generous. Because I didn't want anything back from her world. Not a single thing with her fingerprints still on it. There was one moment I didn't expect. A letter. Mailed in a plain envelope, no return address, but I knew the handwriting. Inside was a short note. You don't have to forgive me. I wouldn't. But I hope one day you forget the worst of it. I hope you remember something good. I did love you once. I think I did. No signature. Just space at the bottom. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just folded the paper, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it into a drawer I never opened. She hadn't written to apologize. She'd written to be remembered. But the truth was, the version of her that mattered, the one who used to lean her head on my shoulder during movies, who once cried when I surprised her with a book she mentioned offhand, that version was already gone. I wasn't grieving a person. I was grieving a ghost. The final formality came on a Thursday afternoon, 2 months after she'd been locked out. The courthouse lobby smelled like dust and old wood polish. Our lawyers exchanged brief glances. We sat across the table from each other. She looked thinner. Or maybe just tired. No eye contact. Just pens scratching across documents. When she slid the last form forward, she paused for a second. Fingers resting lightly on the paper. I half expected her to say something. To break the silence. She didn't. She signed. I nodded. That was it. No final words. No closure. Just 2 signatures and the hum of fluorescent lights. As I walked out of the building, the air felt heavier than I thought it would. Not sad, not relieving. Just final. The kind of weight that settles in your chest when you know there's nothing left to hold onto and you're the one who decided to let go. By the time I reached the parking lot, my phone buzzed. A text from a friend I hadn't seen in months. Someone who'd gone quiet after everything began to unravel. Heard it's final. If you ever want to get a drink, I'm around. No judgment. Just company. I stared at the screen for a while. Then typed. Might take you up on that. It was a small thing. But it was mine. Because while Allison had spent months, maybe years, curating an image to impress people, I was starting to rebuild something real. Something quiet. Something honest. Not for her. Not for revenge. For me. The official paperwork came in a thick envelope 2 weeks later. Plain manila, no ceremony, just the dissolution of a life printed in black and white. Denise had included a note, "Congratulations, you're free." It was meant kindly, I think. I just stared at those words a while before placing the envelope in a drawer next to the letter Allison had left behind. No alimony. No drawn-out hearings. No attempt to reclaim anything. Just the car she drove, her retirement account, and that bracelet from Barcelona. Everything else stayed with me. I half expected her to protest something, to send one last email questioning the split, or asking for the condo, or fighting for the rug she claimed tied the living room together. But she didn't. When her lawyer sent over her signature, it came with a single line of acknowledgement, "Client accepts terms in full." That was it. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. There was something eerie about how cleanly it ended. No crash. No fire. Just silence and distance. But I guess that's how it had been unraveling all along, quiet betrayals, passive goodbyes. I used to wonder if she felt remorse, if she replayed the nights she'd crept into the condo smelling like someone else's cologne and thought about the man asleep down the hall. Now, I didn't care. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was just clear. And that was enough. I moved out of the condo 3 weeks after the papers were finalized. Not because I had to, but because I wanted a different kind of silence. Not the kind that fills a room after a lie, but the kind that feels like peace. The lake house in Idaho wasn't big. A 1-story cabin with a wraparound porch, a dock out back, and just enough space for the quiet to stretch. It had belonged to my uncle, and after he passed, it sat empty for years. I wasn't even sure why I'd held onto it. Now I knew. I brought only what mattered, some clothes, a few books, my old guitar, and a dog-eared photo of me from a road trip years back, long before Allison. I left the wedding album, the framed vacation *TS, the tastefully coordinated furniture we bought to impress guests. None of it felt like mine anymore. At first, the silence hit hard. No footsteps down the hall. No quiet clinking of a wine glass. No second toothbrush by the sink. Just me, the creak of the porch swing, and the occasional owl outside the window. But slowly, the silence stopped sounding empty. I started waking up earlier, naturally, no alarm. Brewed coffee without checking my phone. Took long walks by the water. I even started journaling again, something I hadn't done since college. Sometimes I'd sit for hours by the lake, watching the light shift over the surface, breathing in a life that wasn't curated, filtered, or compromised. A few old friends visited. People I hadn't seen in years. They didn't ask about her. Not because they didn't care, but because they knew there wasn't anything left to say. We grilled steaks. Drank beer on the dock. Laughed like time hadn't passed. It felt honest. Solid. Like myself. Allison still texted sometimes. Not often. Once every few weeks, soft attempts to reopen doors she'd sealed shut herself. Hope you're well. Saw a place that reminded me of that trip we took. Can we talk? I never blocked her. I just never replied. She once relied on my silence to protect her lies. Now it was all she had left. And for the first time in years, that silence wasn't a burden. It was my freedom.